welcome everyone. Welcome to another Conversations in Consciousness with Lisa and Keith. I am Lisa Warner.
And I am Keith Leon S. And thank you so much for joining us today on Conversations in Consciousness. And today we have a very special guest. You see before you Reverend Wendy Silvers. And I want to tell you a little bit about her before we dive into the topic of today. Reverend Wendy Silvers she's a mom, she's a minister, she's a spiritual teacher, she's a conscious activist. Matter of fact, she helps moms change their worlds from the inside out. She helps them to raise healthy, empowered kids and to lead with love. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Reverend Wendy is known best for her prayers, right? Keen intuitive wisdom, honesty, and fierce compassion. She's the founder of Million Mamas Movement, creator of the Awakened Mother series, host of the Awakened Mother Show podcast, and co-author of the international best-selling book, Balance for Busy Moms. Her next book will be published in 2025, so stand by for that. Reverend Wendy produces and hosts events, and she speaks at cutting-edge venues such as Agape International Center, woohoo! Conscious Living Expo, Bhakti Fest, Health Freedom events, and spiritual centers all over the country, I'm sure. She shared stages with Michael Beckwith, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Del Bigtree, great-grandmother Mary Lyons, Kelly Gores, Marianne Williamson. Ooh, I've got to do that too. Dr. Shefali Sabari, got it. Panache Desai, Sister Jenna, and other luminaries. She's received the American Riviera Women's Entrepreneur of the Year Award in 2014, and she's a proud mother of an amazing young woman. Her daughter is Joie-May, who you will know from a few shows ago, and she is her mom. So we're so grateful and honored to have Reverend Wendy with us today. And today we're going to talk about Christ consciousness. And as you know, we love to have our guests, or may not know, we love to have our guests choose what they want to talk about. And so kick us off, Wendy.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Keith, for having me here. And it's always such an odd and awkward experience to hear someone read your bio. It's so interesting, right? So for me, Christ consciousness is the enlightened state that we all strive to live in as we walk the earthly plane. And it's a rather fascinating story because I call him Yeshua rather than Jesus or sometimes Yeshua. And I've had an affinity toward Yeshua since I was a tween. And I didn't grow up in a family that was religious nor really honored Yeshua. And until I walked through the doors of the Agape International Spiritual Center in 1999, I did not really know very much. I just knew that at like 12 years old, I walked into the kitchen and I said to my mother, I love Jesus. And my mother was like, what? What? And
what?
And I didn't even really know what that meant. You know, I went to various forms of organized religion, and it didn't, not that I don't respect, all of what has been handed down and taught through the eons. It just didn't connect with what I felt. And I had this, so when I walked through the doors of the Agape International Spiritual Center and I found out that he was actually a rabbi, I was like, what? And that, all of the details about Yeshua's life, and then also kept learning through different biblical scholars, reading the Bible, because I didn't necessarily relate to the scriptures, but sacred text is sacred text. So I was interested in learning and growing. And then I remember I was listening to you talk about some of your spiritual experiences, the healings that you had. And I remember it was probably, I'm trying to remember, I don't even think Joie-May was born yet. And I was in the back of the sanctuary. So for those that are listening, the Agape International Spiritual Center is now like a mega spiritual center. It's based in LA, but it beams out, and there's satellites all around the world. And so in 1999, early 2000, it was housed in a city called Culver City in California. And there was this big warehouse that had been transformed into in a business park into the Agape International Spirit Center. And we had a sanctuary, and it was very big, and it held 1,500 people at one time. And so I was sitting in the back of the sanctuary, and I was listening, and I was tuning in, and I had been on a spiritual path. I've been on a spiritual path since I can consciously remember at 8. But I've been on this path and explored different pathways. And I was sitting, and I had this experience where Yeshua and Mary Magdalene came to me, and they spoke to me about the union, the mystical marriage. And they said I would be teaching it, and I was like, excuse me? Like, first of all, I was like, what am I hearing? Like, what's happening here? And so I just took it in. I just was like, this is extraordinary. I'm so grateful. Thank you. And so Christ consciousness to me is about the enlightened state of consciousness. And I use the word light because it is the light, that place within us that becomes illuminated and luminous with the truth. I mean, this human who became the Christ was so steeped in all of the mystical teachings. And so to me, Christ consciousness is that aspirational place of being in that place of love. That's not a greeting card love. We're not talking like, I love you today, but maybe not tomorrow. It's like, if you do all these things and check off the list, I love you. But if you don't, out. This love that is eternal and just keeps giving more of itself and literally births and sustains galaxies, like that kind of love that runs through our veins. And I keep hearing in my head, and it's probably because I do so much work with mothering and families, but I keep hearing, be ye as a little child. You know, that invitation, we enter this place in consciousness, right? The kingdom is within, but we enter this place of consciousness with childlike awe and wonder. You know, a child does not come into the world with scorn, with skepticism, with racism or bigotry or any kind of the isms. It just comes in open. Yes, it may have a curriculum on its soul, but it comes in like, oh my God, look at everything. And to me, that's how we enter into this place of enlightenment, of raising up, rather than getting caught by this quote unquote 3D world.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I also think about the purity and the innocence, like the purity of consciousness, that purity of connection to the divine.
Yes.
As the child.
And what's interesting too, if you look at this and we widen the lens, or we use this as a metaphor, if you think about it, humans and a lot of people on spiritual paths have a very difficult time with the emotional journey. We talk about the feeling tone. It's the feeling tone, because we live in an electromagnetic universe that responds by corresponding to the frequency. Well, if you watch a child have their feelings, and if you don't try and compress them, suppress them, control them, they will laugh, they will cry, they will, the ugly cry, they'll be on the ground having a tantrum or something, and then they're up. They're like, if you allow that to like move through you, and so many of the complications in our world emerge from that time in a person's life when they were not given the permission or held in a container of, wow, you're having a really hard time. Wow. Yeah, you're really angry. Yeah, you're really sad. Wow, I'm going to be here. I'll be right here with you. Or we don't hit people. You can be angry, but we don't spit. We don't, we don't hit. We don't bite. We don't pull. When a child is met at the very depth of their being and honored and held in this container, they grow up to be adults that would never harm another sentient being. Self-defense not withstanding, but right?
Yeah. People, when Timar was a kid, once in a while somebody would say, "Hey, is that your son?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, why?" Thinking like, what did he do? And every time they'd say, "Oh, like my daughter fell and scraped her knee," and he just came to her aid and he said, "Just breathe. Just breathe. With each breath, it'll hurt a little less. I'm right here. I'm right here." And he was stroking her on her back. And they're like, how did you raise that child? Like that he would be that loving and that kind and not say, get up, shake it off, walk it off or whatever.
You're okay. You're okay. Just get up.
She was like the love that was pouring from that child. Like, good job, you, to me and Mara. And we were just like, oh, thank you for sharing that. Right. Because we didn't see the interaction. But going back to what you were saying about Yeshua, right? I like to tell people like, there literally was no letter J back then.
Right, so, exactly.
Right? So Jesus, not a thing, but it's okay. It's okay. That would put that aside. Lisa and I were both one of the many things we have in common. We're like born remembering, right? And we remembered longer than a lot of people do before programming came in and tried to program the things we remembered out of us. But like I was constantly getting in trouble being raised in the Mormon church, and they were doing the King James version, right? And they would be preaching. Or if I went with my friend to visit his Catholic church, like I was always getting in trouble because I would just go up and question and be like, that's not what happened. Right? Because I would literally remember things and couldn't remember why, as if I was there. And it wasn't until later as an adult that a shaman was like, hey, you and Mara were there. You were in his outer circle. She explained all this stuff that goes, well, that would make sense. Why, every time I heard like a scripture that just, I would go, no, that's not what happened. Right. And so like when you said what you wanted to talk about today, I was like, that's my jam. I'm all about it. Because like literally in one of our books, You Make a Difference, 55 heart-centered entrepreneurs share their stories of inspiration and transformation. In Mara's chapter, she mentioned me and she said, my husband lives to prove that the things that Yeshua taught are true. And that is my life. Like that is what I do. I like live to prove that all the things that he shared were true, right? Including Matthew 11:24. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believing that you have, it will be yours, right? Happens as you believe. We heard it a couple different ways at Agape, but same exact thing.
Yeah.
And when I went to Agape, that was truly the second time only, because I had found a Church of Religious Science in Lakewood that I was the youth minister for years. And that was the first time I ever heard what I believed coming from the pulpit. But the second time I heard what I believed coming from the pulpit, there also was this music that came that was, for me, it was kind of 80-20. The music was 80% to me, just like had me just bawling and crying. And like you said, like so many downloads did I have there, and so many miracles did happen. Carl Anderson being my personal mentor, getting to sing with Stevie Wonder and Ben Vereen and Nancy Wilson, and the list goes on. All that Agape, right? Following where my heart took me, where I needed to be, and then ultimately I met Mara there. Right? So I met you.
Cool.
I met you there. So
it's so beautiful the way our souls' journeys take us. because I was living in Manhattan. And in 1986 is when Agape was birthed, so to speak. And I was in Manhattan, and I just began my work as a film publicist. I had been a publicist in the entertainment industry prior to that. I had been on a spiritual journey, as I had talked about it. Even when I was working with celebrities and projects and directors, they would all say to me, have you thought about being a manager? Or I love talking to you. Or have you, are you from New York? Where are you from? Are you from California? And I'd be like, no. Mm-mm. And they're like, you're just so California. And I'd be like, it was just like this very interesting thing. And so when I ended up in California, it was, I think it was the weekend that we moved there, because I met John in New York at a Native American prayer circle that I had been a part of for several years. And he was the roommate of the woman. He was the new roommate of the woman who hosted it in if you're from New York, these Upper West Side apartments that have many rooms, and a lot of people, they'll share them and rent them out. And so she rented them out to people in the theater. And my dad had a quadruple heart bypass, and I'd been away. And one of my friends contacted me and said, there's a guy here, and I think you might like him, but he's got a girlfriend. I was like, why are you telling me about a guy that's got a girlfriend? Like, I'm not going to go out with him. So putting all that together, like, we met in New York, moved to LA. I met this woman who went to undergrad with him, and within 5 minutes, she said to me, I'm taking you to a place. I know it's right for you. And he was going back to New York to work. And she took me, and I never left. Like, I've never left. We're talking 24 years later. It's like walking into that, and the music, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the message, it was just talk about, and I knew you, but I didn't know you.
Yeah.
I saw you every week for years. Hi, hug.
Hug.
And then here we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And I too felt as though I was around Yeshua. Like, it was a very whole, like, soul, like,
palatable.
Yeah.
Experience.
Like, I could feel it, like, in my cells. And that's why I would get very inwardly indignant when I would hear people misusing. I'd be like, that's a misuse of what he said.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, there were no consonants in Aramaic at his time. So when you give him these Americanized English terms, it's already lost in translation. But I don't want to, I honor, whoever's called to live a holy life, and a life aligned with higher principles of being in the world. That's, as you say, that's your jam. Like, I'm not here to judge anyone. I also do not want to be judged.
Right. Well, my mom, who I told you was Mormon, she was like, okay, what has him so captured? Let me come check it out. And so she came to Agape, and we were still in Santa Monica at that time.
Okay.
So she came to that sanctuary, and she came for a service, and she was like, Spirit is in the house. Wow. She was like, I got no issues whatsoever. And it was interesting because she even said, how long have they been a couple? And I was like, oh, they're not a couple. Or Michael and Ricky. And she's like, oh, yes, they are. maybe they don't know it yet, but they are. And I was like, okay. And then it was like a year or two later or whatever, hey, we're a couple. And my mom was like,
Mom
told you. She knew before they knew. Wow. Or at least before we knew.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing.
So cool. But yeah, and I brought up this one guy who was super hardcore Christian, and he was just I was like, come check it out. And he checked it out, and he was just like, okay. Yeah. It's like no matter what, anybody that had a relationship with that higher consciousness that I brought, even if it didn't match their dogma, they didn't say anything bad, like at
Yeah.
all. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
just like,
Truth
oh,
is
because you
truth.
could feel it like
Yeah.
so strongly.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. It's interesting. I have the honor of being on the faith-based engagement team for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is one of the finest humans I've ever met. And I lead a prayer every Sunday afternoon. And we have like almost 2,000 people that have registered. And so most of the emails that I receive are glowing, and they're just so grateful that there's somebody that is holding this kind of a heightened awareness, this kind of consciousness in the field of what is, notoriously very dark.
Yeah.
And it's such an honor. And then there's a few emails that will come really hard and fast about this isn't
Yeah.
great idea, wrong minister. It's like, okay, all right then. Very cult-like, very California. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what about love? This is like where I think it transcends, because I'm like, what about love is cult-like?
Yeah.
How is that cult? Like, no one's asking you to dress a certain way, eat only certain foods, but isn't love universal? Aren't we talking about holding a space of love for the world? And
Wasn't that Christ's number one message?
Yes.
Through and through, but only
Yes.
all the time and everything that he said.
Well, that's, to me, that is why, we know that's why it's Jesus the Christ.
Yeah.
Like, his last name wasn't Christ.
Right,
He became Christed, enlightened.
Right.
He became raised in his, because everything is consciousness. Everything in the Bible is consciousness. It's all frequency. It's, one of the teachers that I studied with said, everything is factual, but it's not literal.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you communicate that to people that want to take the exact word and say, this isn't Christ-like? Well, what do you mean? Christ wasn't his last, that wasn't his last name. He was Yeshua ben Joseph.
Yeah.
Joshua, Yeshua, son of Joseph. Right. That's what his name was. He wasn't born, like Joseph and Mary's last name wasn't Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to share that it's a book of metaphors.
Yes.
And then I bring up the telephone game. Remember when you were in school and they lined all the kids up and they said one thing on one side, and by the time it got over here, it was like not even close. Well, it didn't go as many times, maybe, but by the time you got to King James, right? And I have a whole history thing about King James. That's a whole nother diatribe. But that version, like pre-King James, there wasn't fire, brimstone, hell, Satan. Like, it just wasn't there. Like, he added that to scare the crap out of everybody so they would pay him taxes, because they had stopped, because they were reading this book that promised everlasting life, and so they weren't fearing death or him anymore. So he was like, get me those books, and burned them all and rewrote it and put it out again, knowing that he would take care of his family for generations and generations to come. Maybe not this generation, but they worry about generations to come, right? Kings. So that's the King James, and I shared that with many Christians who were like, that was their version, and then they were like, really? And I was like, they're like, but I thought he only, and I was like, no, that's the Google version. But if you dig any deeper, and they're just like, what? And I've had people come like, thank you, because they looked up versions before that. They even went back to Aramaic, right, and that translation into English or whatever, and found that it was a whole different thing. So it's like, it's a book of metaphors. So if we did ring, like if you, I, or Lisa read the King James version, we're not just going to read the words and then just go, okay, that is law. We're going to read and go like, how does that feel? Right.
Right. Yes.
What does that tell me? How can I apply that in my life? Right.
Mhm.
It's a much more universal look at it than this is law, do this, or you're going to live in a fiery pit
Absolutely.
of hell
Yeah.
afterlife. And then fear, like, or always be living for the next life. That's what
I
I
know that.
find so sad. It's
I
like,
do.
well, enjoy this life while we're here.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes. All of that. And the other piece that I remember learning is that King James had a problem with homosexuality, but he himself was, maybe he was bisexual, or something. But and then all of a sudden it became biblical that it was a moral crime to be homosexual or
Mhm.
gay. And I think, but that wasn't in there. That's not what this man taught. Like,
No,
why would he teach that? I have come that you may have life and you may have life more abundantly. Why would he say, except
except
except if you're this, then you can't have that. I was actually, sometimes I find myself like the spiritual police. Like there's this part of me that's like, wait a minute, that is not right. And so I was on this call in this coaching community, and I heard this leader say something about, well, he is available, and they call them, they're scriptural, and he will come to those that believe and follow his way. And I was like, and what about the other people? Like, what about the children? Like, they don't wake up and go, oh, okay, I'm gonna pray to Jesus in Jesus's name, which is a beautiful thing and all that is holy. So I'm not saying that, but little children come in and, like I used to talk to trees. They were my higher power. Does that mean that I would not be loved by God if I didn't know that? Or because I had a resistance to a certain form of religion, does that mean that God wasn't available to me? Like, that's the danger of the misinterpretation. Because to me, Christ consciousness is love is your true nature. Love is right where you are. It is your true nature. Do whatever you need to do to wipe away the dust and grit from the journey. Take the barnacles from your eyes, literally and figuratively, so you can see me in the next person. You look into my eyes and you see me. So that, and should people choose to live that way, that is probably the most strenuous spiritual workout one could ever engage in.
And, I look at it as I live in nature. So, I have
Right.
nature all around, and God is everywhere in nature, in the
Yes.
plants, in the animals, in the water, in the air, in the earth itself.
Yes.
We've become so disconnected from nature and the earth. They've paved over most of the earth. And so, we have gotten so disconnected from that we don't find God in the little things, in the everyday, ordinary things.
Yes. I love that. The evidence of God, the evidence, that's like you can say to somebody, um, peace. Peace is right where you are. Love is your true nature, but it's the evidence. And it's the feeling, it's that little feeling tone of feeling into. We all know when we walk into an environment and love lives there, you can feel it's like walking into this warmth and this cocoon of being seen and loved and accepted.
Mhm.
And then it's also very palpable, probably more palpable to people that are working actively on attuning themselves to the frequencies. But I think most people can feel if you walk into an environment where there's anger and tension, or you're around somebody who's holding that, and you say to them, "How you doing?" "Fine. I'm good." You're like, "Oh, all
There
right
you
then.
go. There you
Enjoy
go.
that."
Yeah. Yeah, that was the thing about agape, and especially once I got in the music industry or the music ministry, and then started like soloing and then
Yeah.
filling in for Ricky when she wasn't there, is feeling 1,500 people loving you and
Yes.
only holding for you to do your best. Nobody had their arms folded saying, "Man, I hope you mess up today." Like, nobody. They were all just like, "Yes, brother," or "Oh,
Yeah.
here's my favorite. I told you about this guy. Watch him." Like
Yeah.
I had legends, because there's so many people from industry, legends
Yeah.
come up and just say, every time you sing, like, "You're my favorite." And I was just
Oh,
like, what are you even like? How, whew, right? So I learned to take in
right.
large amounts of love and
Yeah.
agape, right? That's been such a beautiful gift to me. And one of the things when Carl was working with me, Carl Anderson, he said, he walked up one time and I had kind of messed up, and somebody said, "Oh my God, you were so wonderful today." And I was like, "Yeah, but didn't you hear that when that happened?" Because he was a friend of mine, so I felt like I could say that. But he was like, "Come here, boy." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Never do you say that again. Never." He said, when somebody gives you a gift, a compliment, right? And then you say anything except for "thank you. Thank you so much." It's like you took a birthday gift or a Christmas gift that they gave you and put it on the ground and stomped on it and smashed
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
He's like,
Yeah.
"From now on, the only answer is thank you." And I was just like, okay. So from then on, it was just like, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And in other words, he's saying, like, let it in.
Yeah.
Right. And
Cool.
that's really what Ricky taught me too, was, let it in, because Reverend Michael said many times, you notice when this person sang that you felt it, that's because nobody's performing on this stage. If they're a performer, they don't get on this stage. They're
Right.
being the message, they're being the ministry of who they are, and they're letting spirit, light, right? Christ consciousness pour through them,
Right.
and then you're feeling it. And so they're a channel of that, which is why they're on our stage. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
wow. And then I felt honored to be on the stage. Right.
Yeah. It's prime real estate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a wonderful, such a beautiful gift to be given, to be seen and heard and loved in that way.
Hmm.
That, I mean, if the world, if parents did that with their children from the beginning,
Hmm.
there would be a whole different world. And it would also involve them loving themselves, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Can you
Yeah.
imagine the difference of a child that's conceived in love and consciously and, called in, as opposed to one that's not, just, "Oh, that was an accident." Now what am I going to do? Like, it's a completely different vibe that you are born with.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
certainly Joie-May is a walking, talking demonstration of that.
Yeah, she is.
And,
She was
and
called in. She was
yeah,
very consciously conceived.
Mhm.
and raised with
Yeah.
love, and exactly the way you were talking about. And so
Yeah.
when we completed that call, I was telling Lisa, "Oh, I would love to get my son Timar and her on a call so that people could see two
Yes.
walking, talking demonstrations of when you're raised in that way, like what it looks like. Just the way that they speak is
Hmm.
different than anyone their age would speak."
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's I have I have two funny stories about that. So yeah, she was raised in that kind of environment, and we did our best, at home to do that. And she also went to a school that supported her free and full self-expression as well, which was specifically chosen for that reason.
Mhm.
But I have a couple. I remember when she was I don't even know, she was 2. And we were over when Ricky and Michael were still together, and they lived in the house. And we went over, and Joie-May was walking through, and she was a toddler. She was walking through their house, and she was calling him, and she was saying, Michael, Michael, Michael. And he stopped, and he looked at me, and he said, is she calling me? And I went, yes, she is. And so from that day forward, she became Baba. Like, that was Baba. She was his goddaughter. And, or she may have been his, I don't really know that, but the chronology was, it was a very distinct, like, she could call me Baba, or she could call me that. So, and then I also remember her awareness from like just from being in my sling of all of the energy around, and how I felt very, very called and very responsible to make sure that I was a steward of that, because there is so much love, and there is this fuel that you walk into, especially, when we were at Buckingham, and it was really important to be really conscious. Part of walking a spiritual path with practical feet is that our aspiration, our intention is to hold that Christ consciousness while we're in this world. So it was really about holding that field all the time. So she could become who she is here to be, and be comfortable with boundaries or limits, which sometimes there can be a little waviness with that, but I wasn't allowing that. Yeah.
I love that. That's so important. And, that's really what makes a beautiful, peaceful world, is to have people who are raised in that consciousness.
Yeah.
When I was a little girl, I would go to bed at night, and I would just be in this field of unconditional love and light. And I knew that was, God, that was the intelligence, that was the peace that passes all understanding, that is eternal and everlasting. And, I could turn around and look at the earth and go, yikes, they're not doing that down there. It's like they're fighting over whose God is better than whose. And, there's all this, crazy stuff going on. And it was really, really, very confusing as a 2-year-old to
wow,
know.
you remember that at 2.
Yeah. And I also remember that knowing all of that, then I was shown this picture of Jesus on the cross, I was like, uh-oh, like, it's not safe to know what I know. So it was a really, like I didn't really grow up in that environment. I was more in the fear environment of like, oh my gosh, I can't tell anybody what I know because nobody around me is awake. Nobody is doing this unconditional love except my cat. Like,
or they might take you out. I never caught that part before. Wow.
Yeah, I really truly did not ever feel safe here.
When did you begin to feel safe?
After I went through the whole cancer thing and healed myself and realized that, wait a second, like, I can trust my body. Like, this isn't what's happening here. Like, they're not telling the truth in this world at all. I'm going to start trusting myself. I'm going back to that time when I was 2, and I'm going to totally reconnect. And I am just going to start trusting the below the surface stuff. I'm just going to stop trusting all the surface stuff that we're shown and told. And I'm going to start tuning in, and I'm going to start trusting my body. I'm going to feel safe in my body. And then I'm going to allow myself to start feeling safe here because I'm creating my reality. And when I'm connected to source, now I'm safe.
That's beautiful.
Mhm.
Isn't it interesting how many times what leads us to reclaim ourselves and to surrender and to be open and receptive to Christ consciousness is usually the things that bring us to our knees?
Mhm.
Right? Rumi says, when the world brings you to your knees, you're in a perfect position to pray.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's that human condition of, I got this, I'm going to do this on my own, or, I got to follow the rules, or I'm not going to follow the rules, and then all of a sudden, all of the structures that we each create based on our own personal laws, they come crashing down, and we're like, oh, wait, maybe I need to go back to basics like you did. That's a powerful story, Lisa. I'm so happy that you healed yourself from that coach called cancer. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
a very interesting journey.
I
And
bet. I
discovered
No,
a
bet.
lot about the illusions of this world. And
Mhm.
yeah.
I just started doing something in the mornings, and I'm changing the name, but it came to me right around the new year, and it's called Into the Desert. And it's really about, remember Yeshua went into the desert for 40 days, 40 nights, but he went in there, and it's really about your consciousness. It's really like going into and exploring your consciousness and expanding your consciousness and getting really crystal clear about your true nature. I mean, that even when we jokingly say, Satan, get thee behind me, that, there really wasn't a Satan.
Yeah.
So in my cosmology, for everybody that's listening to this is my cosmology, that I don't believe there was actually a Satan. I believe there may have been a being that was very disconnected from the love in their heart and had a lot of stuff going on, and, cooperative components and all of that, not minimizing the devastation of what happened. But I like it because it's going into that space in consciousness and really bumping up against one's own ego, one's own self, one's own limited perception. So we meet, and as it's been set up for the past 40 days, we completed 40 days. It's a little bit of like a Dharma talk, and then it's meditation, and then it's prayer. And it's usually 30 minutes. And I may extend it a little bit so people get one-on-one. But for the past 40 days, it was so present for me in my heart to offer this opportunity to journey into the desert, which is a metaphor for the consciousness, and really be in that place so that people can remember in the times that we're living in that are so stark. And sorry for the background noise, but for people that are living in such a time such as this, where there's just all these polarities and, all of this stuff raising up in an election year, I really wanted to offer a very sacred, soft place for people to come and remember who they are and whose they are.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Election years, it's such, like I call politics a weapon of mass distraction, because it's just so, people get so involved and so pit against each other. And the whole process is icky to me,
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah. It's,
yeah.
I wonder if it's by design.
Yeah, exactly.
Just like religion, when you talked about before, Keith, about how the King James Bible, when that came around, was really about controlling the masses. Essentially, it's what I took from what you're saying, because they were not following, they weren't paying taxes. They weren't doing the things he wanted. They weren't, not just the man. So he created something that would make them be in servitude to him. And so I wonder sometimes with the political process, if that isn't just an extension of making people dependent on a source.
I'm
That's
always
mistakenly believe. And then we bring in Then we bring in this real circus. We bring in all of the corporations and all of the, special interest agencies. And then we bring in legacy media who will never tell you the truth, but they pretend that they do. And then you're like, holy shiitake, what is going on here? Right? So Christ consciousness, baby. That's it. Christ consciousness.
Love is the answer to every question. Love is the answer to every question.
The thing, what I think about, when I think about Christ consciousness and I think about the way that Yeshua lived, he was so committed and devoted to eternal truth, but he was also deeply compassionate, but he was fierce.
Mm-hmm.
If you were trying to get over on him and you were manipulating or hurting people, it wasn't like he was like, oh, my friend. He was like, I love you enough to say, cut the crap. This isn't going to happen on my watch. But this is the truth. So, I mean, I know that can also get us into, tricky territory sometimes with people saying, well, this is my truth and that's your truth. But essentially what he was about was forgiveness.
Yeah.
Not holding a grudge, because he knows when you hold a grudge, you're the one that's really poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
And you might be really crappy to somebody else, but you also are just as sick. Right.
Yeah.
So you've got that. Then you've got the mercy. That's like, being merciful, being kind, not being the judge and jury of other people, but holding yourself up to a certain level. You've got that love, that eternal love, that doesn't say, oh, I'm going to lay down and let you walk all over me.
Right.
It's like, okay, wait, like love does not like say, treat me like shizzle. Right. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to hurt those people. It's, it's that, to me, and honoring the childlike aspect, that awe and wonder, that enthusiasm, the purity, the innocence that is available. So, like it's such to me, it's very holistic in that wheel of life perspective.
Yeah.
And anger's there, and grief is there, and sadness is there.
Yeah.
In the human experience, you can, as quantum physics shows, you can have grief and feel, joy. You can be grateful and still seek more. Like it's not, it's not like, this man in the sky that's like, okay.
That's Santa Claus.
Right, exactly. Sanity Claus. I always think of him.
Sanity Claus. I like to say, do you really think that he only got mad and flipped over a table and yelled at people one time? I think that's the only time they just decide, well, just put this one in. We don't want to think
exactly. The money changers. We're only going to get mad at the money changers once.
Right.
Just once. That's all.
That's it. The rest of the time he was just like, oh.
Exactly. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
So we get to do that. We get to aspire to walk in the world, to be in nature, like you talked about, Lisa, and see the evidence of God all around, to see the beauty of creation. And then we, which is also part of that Christ consciousness. It's part of that divine, experience, that, and the great God of the multiverse, the great God of this extraordinary galaxy and galaxies. And we get to stand in proxy. We get to carry this forward and love, God self-other. GSO.
GSO. Yes. Oh, well, will you offer a prayer for us?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. Thank you. It's been great to be with you both. My heart is overflowing with gratitude and thanksgiving for the opportunity to step away from the external world of circumstance and personality and experiences, to allow everything that has come before this present moment to simply fall away, to absolutely surrender everything I think I know about life, about love, about Yeshua, so that I may have a new experience of life and love and Yeshua, So very grateful and thankful for this magnificent sacred space that Lisa and Keith have created, the space that is so welcoming and beckoning to those that seek spiritual food, to receive these pearls through which God pours forth through each and every speaker, through Keith and through Lisa, through Maura, through the expressions that show up each and every week. How grateful I am to join that illustrious circle of love. So grateful for Yeshua, so grateful for the Christ consciousness, so grateful for in this moment to remember that there is only one power, one presence, one life, one love, this Mother, Father, God presence that indwells, surrounds, permeates, and saturates everything, everyone, everywhere in this unified field of love without condition. It is so easy for me to speak this word, blessing Lisa, blessing Keith, blessing Maura, blessing TMR, blessing every single person that shows up, every two-legged, four-legged that shows up, blessing the creepy crawlers and the slithering ones, blessing this beloved Mother Earth, blessing humanity, calling forth a continual and consistent opening of the heart and the mind to the Christ consciousness, to stepping into that field of unlimited potentiality, possibility, and love. Being held in this container that is so life-affirming, perfecting our loving, perfecting living, being in that living laboratory of Christ consciousness. So I bless each and every person who listens to this. I bless each and every person who is touched by these conversations in consciousness, knowing that everything is consciousness and form follows consciousness. So each and every person that shows up here today or every day or any day, no matter what time of the day, that they are inspired and uplifted and transformed into the next greatest expression of their being. I know that peace ripples out throughout the world, the peace that passes all human understanding, the peace that is that dynamic quality of this divine presence. And I just call forth peace and abundance and prosperity, love, joy, and fulfillment, filled full with good, filled full with God, filled full with love. And knowing that this and more continues to unfold even after our time together ends, I'm so, so very thankful. And I simply allow that to be, saying, and so it is. Amen.
So it is.
Ashe. Aho. Hallelujah.
So it is.
So it is. Yes, yes, yes.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's been a joy to be with you.
It's
As
been
well.
wonderful getting to meet you, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us.
My joy, really. Thank you. It's great to meet you too. I look forward to hearing more.
Mhm. And all of you who joined us, thank you so much for being here with us today. Don't we bring the most incredible people for you to meet? And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right.
Tell everybody you know about Conversations in Consciousness. And until then, be well. We love you.
Wait for yourself a great couple of weeks because you can. Bye for now.
Bye for now.